Welcome back to Impact and Influence. This is Don McLean, your host. Today we have Jason Cherubini. He's an educator, consultant, film producer, and entrepreneur. Jason, welcome.
Don, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. You know, I maybe just start by telling the audience a little bit about you. I know you're the co-founder of Don's Light Media, and I'd just like to hear a little bit about how you got into that and what you're doing over there.
Sure. Don's Light Media is a film financing and production company. We founded it in 2014. At that point, we were primarily focusing on the financing side of things. And then in 2017, after a handful of good, I'll say, financing deals that we made decent money on, we were seeing a lot of the same problems with different independent films, which were almost entirely from the business side of it. So we decided to throw our hat in and get involved with the production side. And that's really what's carried us through to today.
Wow. What were some of those problems that you saw?
The most common one is undercapitalization, and really not a plan to be capitalized or to have the capital to carry them through. A lot of people would start into production without being fully financed, looking for essentially ways to bring in investors or to bring in money to finish later. And being in a cash crunch is never a good position for any business to be in. And it left a lot of people open for trouble.
I can only imagine. So how did Don's Light Media come about? I know you're an educator. You've also, you you've co-founded or you founded Seraphim Associates in Washington, D.C. Did that sort of happen naturally, or?
Well, Seraphim was my consulting company, which I had started and run for about 10 years before moving more full-time into academia. In 2013, I basically decided I was going to shut up shop. Being a road warrior, dealing with a lot of the stresses from consulting, what reasons I have so many gray hairs, I decided I'd put aside and I was going to focus on the classroom. But I met a lot of great people during that time, a lot of people I had worked with on multiple projects. Some of them became friends. And in 2014, one of those colleagues' friends gave me a call and said, hey, I put a few dollars into this movie. They seem to be having some issues with the accounting finance side of it. Would you take a look? And after telling him how stupid of an idea investing in movies was, we took a look and we, figured out what was going on. Fast forward about 6 months after that, he said, I'm thinking of doing it again. So we looked at the projects, we structured the company from that financing side, and we brought in our other partner, Richard Switzer, who's still working with me to this day, or my partner in everything. He handles a lot of the physical production, and really pushed on how do we maximize the value of these projects. Because especially in independent film, it's small businesses, but often trying to masquerade like big businesses. And as anyone who's been in a startup or been in a small business, you're not Walmart. You can't act like Walmart, and that's fine. You're just operating in a different way. There was a great book on investing years ago, which basically said, you're not a whale, don't act like a whale. You're a shark, act like a shark. So have value in your agility, have value in your ability to do things faster, to adapt to what's available. And that's really where we focus, as opposed to trying to operate our film production like a big studio, just on a smaller scale. We kind of went back and we looked at how do we operate it from the ground up? How do we operate it like that agile shark, not that behemoth of a whale?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think a lot of folks can take something away from that as well. It's I see a lot of people and companies trying to be something that they're not, but, there's only one you, as they say, right? So be who you are, be who your company is. So I really like that. I saw that your company, I mean, you've worked with some stellar folks: Jean-Claude Van Damme, Denise Richards, Dolph Lundgren, Kelsey Grammer, Wesley Snipes, sure many others that I'm unaware of. But how has that been? Do you spend time on sets? Did you ever expect to be in this sort of industry? I mean, can't imagine.
Never expected to be in this industry. Accounting and finance by training. All of my nerd credentials on all of that stuff. Never really expected to be in this side of it. But it's interesting. Once you get over that first little bump of, oh my goodness, this is somebody I watched when I was a kid.
Sure.
Once you have those few moments of being a fanboy, it's not that much different. And that's actually something over and over again it's proven. And when I'm dealing with newer producers or trying to talk people through it, it's a business. These are people who are going to be your employees. It's in the actual process, you're taking yourself out of, hey, I'm a fan.
Yeah.
Everything else is run in a lot of the same ways. You're dealing with a lot of the same problems. There's different egos, there's different experiences that play into it, but a lot of it, people are happy to be working. People like happy work environments. People want it to be a situation where they like coming to set. They don't want to have to worry about, is there going to be a problem with the check? Is there going to be somebody to work with? So it's a lot of the same things that you would see in any company.
Yeah.
After you get over that oomph.
Yeah. And obviously within any business, there's always that HR component and the people part. I mean, people make up the business so much, but I can see that. It's one, public relations is my core background. And I always, when mentoring folks about pitching media and such, they get worried about the big names, the Wall Street Journals and the New York Times. And, those are people too, and I think that seems to translate into the movie business where, once you get past that, that starstruck mentality, remembering that they're people, they have blood in their veins just the same as we do. They have good days, they have bad days, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and with that, I mean, again, something we found with that, it's just as important for us to make sure that the no names and the crew are happy as it is that big name, because that overall feeling, morale on set is infectious across everyone. So if you have somebody who, is there for the day or for a couple of days and they're miserable because they felt like they were being treated poorly, that's going to have a ripple effect through everyone. So for us, and this was an early on thing from even before film, really focusing that everyone walks away with a win. It's everything we're doing. People should be happy to work, happy to get paid, and enjoy their time there. And one of our constant jokes is, we're not curing cancer. We're making movies. It can be stressful, but it shouldn't be anxiety. It can be, we need to get this. It's difficult, but it's not something that people should be upset about. It should be a fun place to come into work because we're making movies.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that. And I think so many people can learn from that that team morale. Do you do sort of different things on set? I assume not all production houses have the similar mentality as yours. So do you do anything specific that's maybe different from the industry?
Actually, one thing that we do, and it's not necessarily that it's different from the industry, but, or it probably depends on which house. I don't want to speak out of a larger level. But on set, we really look to empower the people who are making the movie. Our goal as the producers or as the production company is to make sure that everything is paid for. The financing is in place. The distribution deals on the other side are in place. We've got the names to carry it. But once it's there, our director, the first AD, the second AD, the teams that are there, it's their movie to make. It's their vision. It's their story to tell. So to give them that power to do that without it being micromanaged or feeling like someone is looking over their shoulder.
That's incredible. That's incredible. Congratulations on that. I mean, it sounds, that you guys have really built something special there. How's set been with COVID? I know I have a friend in the industry who's, getting tested 3 times a week for COVID and that sort of thing. How's it been for you guys?
We've been very fortunate. We moved our productions to Oklahoma starting in August. Okay. We had done a few movies there last year. There's a great team there. So we moved there starting in August, and we did 4 between August and we finished December. I want to say it was 10th, but I don't remember the exact date. Okay. And great experience. It's a great crew dealing with it. Walking into it, it was a lot of prep to make sure we minimized any of the risks. So we have the testing, we have our medic on set taking temperature twice a day. Everyone's tested before they get there. No extra people, extra cleaning. I mean, every guild has a whole set of protocols and we're trying to follow them all, but it really is on the people. And again, this is where we put so much stress on it. It's that we empower them to make the decisions and we're trusting them. So we have everyone check their temperature first thing in the morning before they even come to set. Now, once they get to set, our medic is going to test it. But, we have them take that self-responsibility. We have basically everyone agree. And these are relatively short filmings, about 3 weeks. But for those 3 weeks, they're basically self-quarantining. Which on movie sets, you're working 12 hours a day. Normally when you're done, you just want to go to sleep anyways. But, for these 3 weeks, be responsible for yourself. Don't go crazy. Let's get it done without any issues. And we've been very fortunate. We've had no issues pop up with COVID. We had one day player call the morning of. They had an elevated temperature. So we asked them to stay home and we replaced them for the day. But beyond that, following those protocols, we've done well. I've heard a few, I won't say horror stories, but worrisome of false positives, things being shut down for a couple of days, but we have that factored in. We know that that's a potential risk, either a false positive or a real positive. And we have our contingency plan in place on what we're going to do to minimize the damage. Because the last thing we wanted to do was somebody tests positive, everyone freaks out, and then we're not necessarily even dealing with, hey, someone is sick. We're more worried about everyone spazzing out and what problems that's going to have.
No, I can certainly imagine. And it sounds like, you mentioned something at the beginning of that where you said you filmed 4 movies from August to December, something like that. Time management must be a really big thing for you guys as well going into that. And I assume from a finance perspective, you're really focused on the time and the amount of days and whatnot. And, not to get off COVID, but how do you keep such a strict time schedule? I mean, that's incredible.
It's really delegating. I always feel a little funny talking about this with all we do. And I feel big chunks of my day are sitting twiddling my thumbs, or me and my partner, Richard, and we're on the phone being like, we feel like we should be doing more right now. Yeah. But it's setting up the structures in place that things move forward, even if you're not running around. We have a big push on not glorifying busy. You want to be productive, but you don't need to be busy. If things are getting done, you don't need to be running around or looking or putting on the show. Yeah. So during lockdown, we made sure we had all of the scripts in place. We made sure we had a lot of our shooting schedules. We did a lot of that legwork.
Okay.
So we were ready to go with these packages for these movies. We had basically what we were doing payroll, what we were doing scheduling, as much as possible was already done. We had tasked the main people. So our line producer on set who handles a lot of the day-to-day, like our production designer who handles a lot of the locations, the shots, the directors, basically empowering them. Here's what you need from us.
Okay.
Give a pass. And then, let us know for review. But it's not we need to see every step, especially with the people we worked with for this set, we've worked with before. We trust what they're going to give back is going to be good. Now, there may be notes, there may be commentary, but by basically dispersing the work through people who can all focus on what they're doing,
yeah,
you can get a lot done.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. I mean, it sounds like you guys are doing all the right things. And, going back to COVID for a second, I read a Forbes article that said last year you were creating the first carbon neutral film. And are you still on track for that after COVID? How's that going?
Yes and no.
Okay.
Basically, to get to the full carbon neutral, probably not. But that's because a big shift in what we've done is focusing on being COVID safe. But even in that, and talking with our sustainability person who works down at American University, it's how do we minimize the impact of all of these changes from the environmental perspective. We had been on that track and we didn't want to just throw that out of the window. So really it was as we were looking at these COVID changes, what changes could we make still in that sustainability way? What changes would have to be put on hold? And really kind of evaluating a lot of those decisions. So in some cases, some of the things actually helped us further on a lot of our sustainability efforts. Some of the previous, before COVID, the way you did crafty tables, the way you did food, there was a lot of waste. Just the way it was set up, and even trying to cut it down, there was the potential for waste. Now being very targeted, it cost us a little bit more manpower, having somebody basically being designated to that, but there's not as much waste. It's really more to order. So I think coming out of this and looking at it, it's not going to be as big of a setback as it had been, but like with that article, like at that point, a lot of it is planning and thinking through what's being done and kind of questioning what's always been done. Because or like in any business, any startup, anywhere, most expensive words are, this is how we've always done it.
Absolutely.
And in an industry that has so many unions, so many guilds, so many people who have done things one way for 30, 40, 50 years, unless you give them a reason to rethink it or you put that at your forefront, they're not going to do it on their own. And that's nothing negative against them. It's just if something has worked for you for decades, why are you going back to question it?
Exactly. And I assume from your consulting side, it was probably hard to get folks over that mentality.
It's always a hard thing. And it all comes down to cost benefit. Yeah. For a lot of people, they only see the cost. They don't see the benefit, especially if it's something early on that's going to be more of a process focus than a product focus. You're asking them to change the way they do things. And so they see that cost that they have to do all the time, but they're not necessarily seeing that benefit. I always equate it to the idea of if you want to eat healthier and get more fit. Every time someone brings out a salad with the low-fat vinaigrette, you're like, this is miserable, I want a steak. Because you see that cost. you're not going to see the benefit of you're losing weight, you feel fitter for months, but you're seeing that cost every day. So it's really highlighting and showing people, not just these are the changes, it's this is why we're making the change. This is the benefit we're expecting to get out of it, and keeping them looped in on that communication. So it's not just being told, hey, you suck up this cost. It's we're having you do this. This is why we're having you do this. This is what we're expecting to get out of it.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I read the Forbes article, and then I was looking at a few other articles, and I recognized you also have a Wikipedia page, which, for a lot of folks, it's like, you made it when you have your own Wikipedia page. So how does that feel?
Honestly, I was scared a little bit to death when I saw it, because anyone.
Did somebody else make it?
Hmm?
Did somebody else create it, or did you create
it? No idea.
Oh, wow.
But that whole setup, and with a lot of it, until the last 18 months, really had not had a public-facing version of myself, and even from the company side, really we're trying to do head down with it, because we didn't want to show the flash and fancy. We didn't want to get into that game of, and seeing so many other people trying to put on a show of who they are. And that's, we very much were taking a blue collar approach. And this is a job. This is what we're doing. We're making these movies. The pomp and circumstances for somebody else. But what we found about a year and a half ago was buy-in is easier if people can hear about you, to look things up. See, the Forbes article was one of our first big pushes. And that was how do we bring people in to this buy-in of going for this environmentally friendly film? Because that we needed a lot of buy-in to get people convinced on this. Again, to explain the why we're doing this. What are we trying to get to? And the ability to point and say, read this article. This is what we're trying to do. This isn't just we're trying to put on a show for this, or we're trying to make your life more difficult. We're trying to get to this level. We want you to help us get there.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I mean, I love great PR, so it's always interesting for me to read those articles and whatnot. You mentioned Seraphim. I mentioned Seraphim Associates before, but you said you're currently not operating that business anymore, or?
It operates on a very toned down scale. Mostly in the technology space, dealing with tech startups, a couple of MarTech, marketing technology startups, a few more in the creative spaces, but it really isn't a major focus, and it's, I don't want to say a vanity project, but it's things I like working on more than things to do the bills. Had done a video game company a little while ago, a MarTech right now we're working on, but things that I find interesting, either as projects I want to work on, or more so it's founders who they're going to do something. And in some cases, even if the idea today isn't the one that's going to do it, certain people are just, they're good, and they're going to be good.
How do you tell that? How can you tell that that person is going to be something great?
I don't think there's one way or the other. A lot of it is I trust my gut on it, but it really seems to be people who don't get discouraged. And I don't mean that in a never get discouraged, never set back, because some of the greatest, most productive people I know have huge issues with insecurities and doubt and all that. Actually, Barbara Corcoran had a great quote about being successfully insecure, which I thought was a phenomenal way to look at it. But it's people who, when that happen, it's not oh, this isn't working. It's, okay, what do I do next? It really is this didn't work, or this angle of attack isn't working. How do I change? How do I look at it in another way? Here's where I want to use the word pivot, but it gets overused. But it
Sure.
is retacking to see things in different ways. And those people seem to be the ones who are going to get it across the finish line, because their idea today, they're not married to. Their idea today, if it's not working, some part of it is. So they'll move it a little bit there.
Okay. Okay. I mean, you mentioned Barbara Corcoran, and I know you've probably seen a lot of presentations. I don't know how similar it is to Shark Tank, but is Shark Tank, is that reminiscent or similar to what you would see in those presentations, or is it very different than that sort of thing?
It's different than anything I've worked with
Okay.
on, because a lot of times you're not going in cold, or at least we almost never went in cold.
Okay.
Anything, you had already basically had someone inside who brought you in. There was some skin in the game. They had seen your pitch deck. They had heard maybe a phone call or an email about what you're trying to do. So there was some matchup with what they were looking for before you got into the room to give them the pitch. And we always put a little bit of extra effort into, we called it due diligence, but it was really stalking whoever was going to be in the room. So you could try to adjust things on what they may be interested in. So it really wasn't here's my general pitch, isn't what we're doing great. It's here's why you'll like what we're doing. Okay.
I'm sure you've seen some bad pitches in your day. I mean, anything that stands out that, if there's entrepreneurs listening, what could folks do to make some of those pitch presentations better?
The one thing I see constantly, and I've always pushed on, is you've got to hook people early. Okay. A lot of people, I blame the 5-paragraph essay we were all taught in middle school, where you're building yourself up to the point. Sure. In a pitch, you don't want to do that. You have to get their attention early and then build on that. So really, what is grabbing their attention? What is the hook? Why do they want to pay attention into minute 2, into minute 3? So basically, once you get their attention, you can then build the support around it. But if you're trying to lead people to that main point, lead people to that hook, you could lose them before they even get there.
Yeah, I can understand that. I mean, you see the stats around, even about resumes, where they're like, somebody will make in 8 seconds, I believe was the latest number from Harvard Business Review. But, you see that as soon as somebody makes a decision about you, it's done. They don't hear anything else. Do you find that same sort of situation?
Exactly. And that's where so much of what you do in your pitch and the way you present is not necessarily trying to win them over, but not to lose them. It's really a lot of things, making sure that there's not a reason for them to go, oh, that's why we're going to say no. Because really, everyone who's putting money in, or every informed investor, they're starting from a position of no. It's not you have their money and you say something to lose it. They're starting with I have to listen to another pitch. And some of these investors, hundreds of pitches in a similar field. So you need to catch their attention with that hook, but you also need to give them no reason to validate any of their normal reasons for saying no. So making sure you have everything set up, organized, what's coming in. You're not going to get too flustered with a question. And and a lot of that is also trying not to take it personally, because they could say no for 1,000 reasons, or they could ask questions that you think are being, not pleasant or whatever, but there may be a reason for it, something they've seen before, or, something they're on the lookout for. So it's taking everything in stride.
Yeah. I like what you said about starting from the no perspective. I think that's interesting. I haven't actually heard that before. So for me, that puts it in a different frame of mind there. That's really interesting.
Yeah. I mean, if you're, the investor who has the money, there's always going to be somebody else who's coming to ask you for it.
Oh, sure.
So they're basically always going to have a next option.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, recently on Twitter, there was a whole thread of VCs who were talking about the biggest deals they missed on.
Okay.
And why someone passed on Uber, why somebody passed on Facebook, and realizing that these very, very smart, very, very big funds who have done all kinds of wonderful investments said no to unicorns. So it's not just that they're saying no to you. They said no to Tesla. They said no to Elon Musk went to pitch to somebody saying, hey, I'm going to be the richest guy in the world. Do you want to invest in me? And somebody said no. So if you get a no, you're in good company.
That's so interesting. And I'm going to have to look up that thread because I'd love to read some of those no's. So that's interesting to me. Have you ever, one of the questions I was thinking about earlier was, have you ever consulted with a startup not to take an investor's money? And do you have some of the reasons behind that?
Oh, depending on how they're going to finance and what they really need the money for, raising capital to just raise capital is not always a good idea. And I'm a little split on it because if somebody's willing to give you money, a lot of times it's worth taking because when's the next time someone's going to give you money? But unless you have a plan for where to put it, for what to do with it, to make that money work, to give away part of your company, to give away part of the control for money that's just going to sit in the savings account to buy you a little bit of safety, is that really worth it? And in some cases, it's not the money, it's the investor. Especially you get into an activist investor, somebody who wants to have more control. It may not be something you want to deal with. Like I say to people who are first starting off in professional services when they're getting their first clients, realize you can fire a client. You don't need to work for them. It's really hard to get over that saying no to someone who wants to write you a check. But if they're causing you stress, if they're making your life and everything else more difficult, it's better to say no to them. The same goes from the investor side. If it's somebody who's going to be difficult, if it's going to be a constant problem, it may be worth saying no now. You keep more control and you're not going to have those issues.
Okay. Very interesting. In thinking about valuation for startups for a second, what do you think is one of the main things that people do wrong when valuing their startup?
I think they come to just one number and they present their startup at this one number. The way I've always gone about it, and one of the pushes is to go through and value out the range of where your startup could be based on your different assumptions. And also based on, because most people will use a discounted cash flow model to do their valuations. And a big factor in that is the discount rate. So play with that number as well. So you're not going in and saying, I think my startup is worth 20 million pre-funding. It's based on these assumptions, it's worth this. If we're being more conservative, it's worth this. If we're being more optimistic, it's worth this. And have that range. So even if you're asking for investment on that $20 million valuation, you see what range it could potentially be. And especially for an investor who may be focused more on the risk side as opposed to the absolute numbers, you're able to say your downside valuation comes to here, but your upside moves the limit. So.
Yeah, that's interesting because, as a Shark Tank fan, and I hope you don't take offense to any of this, but as a fan, you see they're like, well, there's approximately 300 million people interested in my product. And it's like, well, that takes a long time and a lot of money and whatnot. But I can imagine that a range would be a lot more important for folks.
Yeah. And again, when you're talking, because a lot of times on your valuation, there's a little bit of back and forth, especially if you get to the investment stage. I feel it's almost more important to show as the startup that you've looked through the downside risk. You looked at what could go wrong. Because if all of you're looking at is the pie in the sky and things are going to be great and wonderful, if it doesn't work out, we're in trouble. But if you're showing, hey, we've understood all of these downside risks, we've factored them in, they're part of our analysis, the comfort level you're giving as a well thought out founder, I think is improved.
Yeah, absolutely. And it seems like that you're more realistic and folks are more likely to trust you, I would imagine.
Yeah. And I mean, the two major emotions, fear and greed, that go into anyone's investment decision, that fear is like a 4 times more powerful motivator. So dealing with that fear, they don't need to see as much on the upside. But if you're not addressing the downside, you need to show a lot more potential on the upside to get people to invest.
That's interesting. Now, the psychology of investing right there. That's interesting. You know, I know you're a successful entrepreneur yourself. You know, for any entrepreneurs listening, just overall business advice. Is there anything that you think that maybe folks, you know, of course, people have to act upon it, but what's been some of the most valuable lessons that you've learned over the last handful of years?
The single biggest one, this one's easy, is stop planning, start doing. Or words I have on my desk here are don't plan, period, do, period.
Okay.
It's really easy to get caught up in the planning stage and you feel like you're accomplishing something. You feel like you're moving forward because you're working on that plan. You're working on that business plan. You're working on, I don't even want to say a prototype, but mapping out your wireframes.
Okay.
So you're feeling like you're accomplishing something, but you're not actually making progress. You do a lot better by getting started, by actually creating and then adjusting. 2 quotes that always jump in my head. One is Mike Tyson. Everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the face.
I love that one. Absolutely.
Use it all the time because your plan is great. It's worth having. But once you get out into the real world of difference. The other one I think is Reid Hoffman, which is if you're not embarrassed by the first version of your product, you release too late. And I think that's huge because no matter what you put out in the market, no matter what you start doing, that first version that goes out is not going to be perfect. You just need to accept it's not going to be perfect, but I'm going to be able to fix it. I'm going to be able to make it better. I'm going to get it closer to perfect faster if people are using it, if people are giving me that feedback.
That's amazing. How do you get over that, you know, planning versus doing phase? Because a lot of people do get caught there. You know, it reminds me of a conversation somebody was having with me before about strategy versus tactics, and you know, spending so much time on strategy, but you know, we never actually got a chance to execute the tactics because you know, the client gave up. You know, there was too much focus on that strategy. So how do you get people beyond that planning and just do it?
It's kind of, you jump and build the parachute on the way down. You need that, just, we're going to do this. Let's jump. So you see
beyond the fear.
Yeah, this is when we're launching. We're putting something out. It doesn't matter what it is. And in a lot of ways, or I found that in that first release, you put it out to get the feedback and the negative feedback and experience the negative feedback, experience the criticism, and don't challenge it. Take it, read it, understand it, use it to make it better. Because even if it's worded in a nasty way, it's still really useful information. Now, if somebody just says, your product sucks, go home. That's not, but if they're like, it sucks because it lags, or it's a bad product because, well,
Yeah.
they're now giving you feedback, and it's free feedback.
Yeah.
Or at least it's independent. They're taking the time to give you the feedback. It's not somebody you're paying to be yes. It's somebody who either is a customer or a potential customer who's telling you why they like, what they like about your product or what they don't like. And you can use that information in your iterations.
Yeah, that's interesting. And, the feedback might not be pretty, but you can't ignore it, right? And I think a lot of people tend to ignore things that might not be positive.
That's when I first started putting out some extra articles and stuff, writing. The first thing I did was throw them up on Reddit and basically just get reamed out by people. And it was part of the process. It's, okay, I'm going to try to write and publish some. Let's see what people say.
Okay.
The ones that are like, you suck, go home, you can throw those out. They're basement dwellers and their opinion really doesn't matter. But other people are like, this doesn't work because, or this didn't make sense because. And all of those things, this is an audience or customers or consumers that you can then take that information and go, okay, that's where that one was wrong. Let me improve using this feedback for my next round.
And did you, speaking to Reddit specifically, because now you got me interested. Of course, I've been interested, but no, I mean, I've never heard of that necessarily before. Did you put like the raw article on Reddit to get their input, or did you post like a something that's already been published?
A lot of times I would throw them up on like my personal blog or on Medium or something.
Okay.
And especially things that were more, I won't say controversial, but maybe against a particular grain.
Okay.
I wrote one talking about passion being for amateurs and threw it up on our screenwriting, and they hated me for it. Absolutely despised me for it. But in the ones that were just venomous, there was also really good feedback. Things like the way I was using the word passion versus the way a lot of them were understanding it was different.
Okay.
The way some of the examples that were being used, some of the questions they had on that, it was good. I'm like, oh, you didn't understand that, or you know what, that makes a better point. And so the next iteration, having those factored in, the way it went through gave me more info on how to structure.
Okay. I love that. I'm definitely going to take something away from that, but I think others can learn from that too. I mean, seeking that feedback is really important. And I know a lot of people, they just don't go that extra step to seek feedback to make something better. So that's really incredible. That's really incredible. I wanted to go back to Dawn's Light Media for a second. So I know we're almost at time here, but
we got plenty. Whatever you need.
Oh yeah, no, thank you. What's next? What's next for you guys? I saw you have a lot of films either in production or pre-production or post-production. So it seems like there's a lot going on. How many do you have planned for 2021?
We think we're going to hit 12 films as of now,
Wow,
but
that's incredible.
Right now we're really taking it quarter by quarter.
Okay.
With everything going on in the world, to go too far or set too much in stone that far ahead doesn't benefit us. And that's where being an independent company that we are, that's us being a shark as opposed to a whale.
Yeah.
We can make a decision 3 weeks ahead of time. So I don't need to decide what we're doing in June. We can make that decision in May. We've got the groundwork laid out. We've done all of our prep work, but for our decision to turn it on really is, okay, we're going to sign the contracts. We're going to bring people in, but we can make that decision right up until time to then adjust from there.
I like that. That's what you were saying about being nimble, being able to make those decisions when you need to. So,
yeah, and with a lot of it, it's not, when this is something we constantly battle, internally, and not in a bad way, just
Oh, sure.
wanting to plan ahead,
Mhm.
wanting to know what we're doing in 6 months and 9 months, but
Yeah.
there's no benefit to making a decision today. So both me and my partner all the time when we get into that cycle need to be like, sit on your hands. There's going to be nothing we should do today. There's no benefit from making the decision today. Let's wait 3 months. Let's get new information. Let's make a decision when we'll be in a better position. So the only reason why we would make a decision today and not 3 months from now is if there was some benefit to making the decision today. And for us, normally there isn't. It's better for us not to plan. We have all of our groundwork in place, so when it's there, but there's nothing else to do until it's time to actually make the decision.
Okay. All right. Wonderful. What's your favorite movie, Jason, that you guys have done so far? Do you have a favorite? I know there's been a number of them.
Well, that's the favorite one that we've done, or I have a soft spot for our first one, Blackwater, which was Van Damme and Dolph Lundgren.
Okay.
It really was for me still the amazement of, hey, this is making a movie. Hey,
Got
these
Lionheart.
are people I grew up watching, and
Sure.
having breakfast with Jean-Claude Van Damme, and I just keep thinking Bloodsport and Kumite.
Yeah.
There was still a lot more of that, so I have a very endearing feeling for that movie, and learning so much so quickly, being there. Yeah, that one was probably my best because of the experience. The one we just had released this last summer, Money Plane with Kelsey Grammer and Edge, was an absolute blast. That was just a fun movie. Everyone on set was having a great time in terms of it being the type of filming environment we want.
Yeah.
That kind of hit on it. Everyone was happy every morning to come to work, or I'm sure somebody, if they listen to this, will say, but there was that one crappy day or that one. But overall, it was good, and we had a lot of people who had worked with us before, so it was a fun environment.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I can only imagine. And it must be surreal watching some of these movies, especially if you've been on set, to kind of relive some of those memories as well. Have you experienced that?
It's actually, it ends up being tough for me to watch the movie by the time it's done, because being on set for one thing, but then we get the first cut of the movie.
Yeah.
So you're watching kind of the way it's put together, and you end up seeing it a half dozen times in various forms before it's final, if not more than a half dozen.
Yeah.
But there can be something that you didn't like the first time through, and even though no one else in the world is going to notice it, and they've basically scrubbed every part of it, you just don't like one thing about it. That's still every time you see it. And that's, I feel, with any, or I'm going to say any creative endeavor. I don't consider myself creative in these movies, but if you're doing something, you see all of your mistakes that everyone else in the world may not, and that's still where you focus in on.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a constant editor myself, so even if I write something, it's like a month later I'll look at it and be like, what was I thinking? So yeah, I can only imagine. But
that's where I need to hit publish, is because I just basically stop looking, hit publish, because otherwise I will keep wordsmithing from now until the end of time.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why I started the podcast, was I just start publishing more. So I'm very excited for that. But no, this has been incredible, Jason. And where can folks watch some of these movies? Blackwater, you mentioned Money Plane. Where are they available?
Money Plane right now is on Hulu. Going to Amazon Prime, I believe it's in 2 months. Everything else is available digitally, so you can get it through Apple TV or Amazon Prime, or a lot of them are on demand as well.
Okay. All right, perfect. And where can folks follow you online, Jason?
My website is jasoncherubini.com. That's where any of my writings go. Otherwise, I'm across social media at Jason Cherubini.
Okay. Well, thank you, Jason. I appreciate you joining us today. Have a great one.
Appreciate you as well.
Bye.